Okay.
And then I have the Rugrats lady too over here.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
I see that.
And
Great.
these two broads bought the house, so I always like to split them.
Yeah.
Gentlemen, synchronize swatches. Not a problem.
Welcome to Synchronized Swatches. We have a very special episode today. Melanie Chartoff, aka Miss Musso, is here with us. An actor and comedian, she's done film, television, theater, and Broadway. She's a writer, contributing to numerous publications, and her book, Odd Woman Out, is available everywhere books are sold. And apparently she's even an inventor.
Melanie Chartoff, welcome to our podcast.
Thank you.
Let's jump back to the beginning of Parker Lewis. Let's talk about the casting experience. Did you actually have to? You didn't have to audition for this, right? Did they actually reach out to? Because you were pretty well established at this point because of Fridays and numerous other works you've done, right?
No, I definitely had to audition.
Okay.
And one of my dearest friends, Karen Klaber, who was publisher of the Berkeley Monthly up in Berkeley, California, had this kind of demeanor. I mean, she would come into her little newspaper office dressed to the nines, like Evita Peron, and wear high heels. And I thought, that would be a great kind of model for this character. So I kind of based it on her, a very kind of stuck up, elitist, provocative, angry. And I guess it worked for that audition that day. So.
Oh, it was perfect. I mean, it's just imprinted in our brain. Your performance as Miss Musso is imprinted in our brains. It's indelible.
It was so much fun to be the villain for a change. I was growing out of the sweet young thing age. And so it was a perfect fit for me at this time to be manipulative and narcissistic and threatening. And I know at the beginning of this series, we had some words about some of the choices that they were making in the writing of Miss Musso. I remember at Halloween, Ms. Musso had a bonfire in which she was burning Parker Lewis in effigy. And I said, guys, I don't really think the character would go quite that far. She's still a principal approved by the Board of Education. And, she has to be a legitimate principal.
Right. She had to ride the line. So you did have some input as far as how the character developed.
Yes, there's always a lot of resentment when an actor contributes. But in that case, they did listen to me and trust my instinct. If they wanted a long-running series with a real story, with real pathos and heart and empathy, they would have to keep all the characters somewhat sympathetic.
Yeah, indeed.
That makes sense. What were your first impressions of Miss Musso when you were first introduced to her?
Actors always look at the adjectives with which their characters are described. Clyde had a epithet that said apoplectic. And I thought, apoplectic, that's like Tina Turner in, the Blade Runner movies. Not Blade Runner movies, the Mad Max movies. Apoplectic is like way, way over the top. And I thought, they really want this character to be a human cartoon. And when I read the script, I saw that there were special effects in almost every scene, not just me making the glass explode in my office window. Or sometimes I'd have smoke come. They'd put tubes behind my ears and smoke would come out of my ears. Or they would put some kind of sparkler on my high heels so that when I walked down the hall, my shoes would be aflame, in the shop. So I thought to myself, this is going to be like a special effects sci-fi movie. And it was. I mean, sometimes we worked 14, 15-hour days. So by the time the weekends rolled around, on Monday, we would start at 6 a.m. and be done by 5 p.m. By Tuesday, we were starting at 8 a.m. and going because every day we ran late. So by Friday, sometimes we were starting at noon and shooting till 2 in the morning. So it was a very extreme, thing for the actors, and me being the oldest, it was a little more extreme for me than for the boys. But it was worth it. It was so much fun. I just love this show. I love this role. So much fun.
It's interesting what you say about the apoplectic thing, because I feel like that's evident on screen, but it's also like you did such an excellent job of like maintaining that internally sometimes and not just letting it explode. That's one of my favorite things about the character, especially what you were talking about with the smoking hair scene. There's just like this intensity to the performance that is terrifying. I think as a kid in middle school or high school, watching you hold it in like that, you're like, oh my God, this is going to be terrible. This is going to be so bad when it finally explodes.
What was funny was that I was cast in Rugrats at the same time to play a sweet little neurotic mommy, this character over here.
Yeah.
And so I would be doing Miss Musso all days, and then they would send a car and I would be sent in, the Nickelodeon recording studio, and I would have to just be this sweet little mommy, completely depressed and never an angry moment at all. So for me as an actor, it was like being in rotating repertory, like being in theater where you play Moliere at night and you rehearse Little Mary Sunshine in the daytime. So that's the kind of test I love as an actor, be able to play different facets of yourself in a day. One of the challenges for me was that as Miss Musso, the role was so indelible that after that I kept getting called in for really over-the-top, narcissistic characters. And, it was very hard. I had to say no sometimes. I remember at the end of the series, two of the writers on the show, David Stephen Cohen and Roger Schulman, invited me to be on Queen Latifah's show, which was called Living Single. And I think they expected that same kind of extremity for me, but this was a much more laid back, natural show. And so I had to sort of, calibrate how fiery I could be in this role as I think was a human potential teacher. But I did my best. I didn't want to get typed as Miss Musso, delicious as she was to play. I definitely wanted to still be doing Shakespeare and still be doing other sorts of things. So,
what did you think about the way that Miss Musso was written over the course of the show as a single woman in a powerful position in her mid to late 30s or whatever they described her as? How did you feel about the writing of the character as the show went along?
I really sympathized with it because I was a single woman and, hoping to one day marry, which I recently did finally. So for me, it felt like a sympathetic role for women who are career women, but have not yet found the presence or the person to be a wife or a mom. So I identified with that a great deal. I felt it was spot on. I know they did a Ms. Musso's 40th birthday episode in which she's losing her mind about being 40 and weeping and collapsing into her salad, at lunch. And, it was really kind of wonderful. It was satirical, of course, but also I tried to make her empathic so that, people would be sympathizing with the character and her predicament of having to be a hard ass all day with these unruly boys. And then wanting to be a soft and little feminine, desirable mate for some guy. I think there was one episode in which I get fixed up with Parker Lewis's mother's brother. And I completely am lost as to how to be feminine and vulnerable. So I'm on the phone with my therapist many times in the episode, consulting about how to be this character. And at the end of the story, he breaks up with me and her duplicity becomes quite evident because she says, how come you didn't love the woman I was trying to be?
That's great.
The soft,
sweet question.
Sweet feminine woman I was trying to be. And that was very clever. They also did a wonderful thing in the Miss Musso's high school reunion. They like to put Miss Musso in ridiculous costumes.
Oh,
ridiculously tight, ridiculous collars. And in this particular episode, they put me in the tightest gown that would be known to womankind. It was so tight, they had to sew me in and out of it. And it had a big ruffle, over here. And so when we broke for lunch, everybody skedaddled to get, to food service. And I was in my dressing room trying to get out of this thing by myself. And I was trying to go to the restroom. I had a bathroom in my trailer. And I was trying to twist myself out of it. And I somehow got caught, and tripped and fell on the floor. And then my legs were clamped so tightly together by the gown, I couldn't get up or walk. And so I'm yelling, help, help. And finally a Teamster heard me and he started to open the door. But I said, no, don't open the door. Call the costuming department. And so he finally went to where they were having their picnic in the sun and called costuming. They had to cut me out of it so I could go to the bathroom. And then I didn't want to get back into it after that. I was very traumatized by this gown. It was also crinkly. You guys never have to wear crinkly, really itchy, awful. And I just didn't want to get back into it, but we still had a lot to shoot. So I did have to get back into it. But
Is that's the episode with the Jello drop at the end, right? The one where they try to drop the Jello on you at the end of it.
oh, and then he saves my life. Parker saves
Yeah,
my
yeah.
life.
From the Jello.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's the same episode.
That adds more context to the fact that you were able to dive to the floor in that scene in the same outfit. That's amazing.
You played it on your podcast. That's why I'm remembering it. Because
Yeah.
it's years ago, and there were a lot of clever things that went on in those episodes. And so I thought, oh yeah, I remember that. They did have this kind of undercurrent that Parker really did like Miss Musso. At some level, he respected Miss Musso. He didn't really want her to die, and she didn't really want him to die.
Yeah.
So I was really glad they maintained that, slender thread of our affection or respect for each other.
Yeah, I think that's one thing the show did really well too, was even though you have these like very arch characters and it's just very, it's an extreme universe that everything's existing in, but they did a good job of like keeping everybody, like you say, sympathetic. I mean, even with Coob, who's supposed to be the big dumb oaf, but like there's times when he's smart, there's times when he connects with Parker. And then, with Grace and Parker as well, like, especially I think the one we watched fairly recently was with Dr. Pankow. And, Parker has to work with Grace to get Pankow ousted, so it's just great to see that it's not so black and white. I think this show, especially for that time period, late 80s, early 90s, you didn't see a lot of that in sitcoms.
No, it was great. I think the only time they went over the line, and this was in the last season, so I couldn't really complain. Miss Musso's parents came to school, and it turned out to be Leave It to Beaver's parents. And, and the Beav turned out to be my brother. And I thought, they really broke the reality, But it was funny to many watchers, and I just kept my mouth shut and went with it. What was her name? Barbara Baxter, I think. She was the perfect sitcom mother. And
Barbara Billingsley,
Barbara Billingsley. I'm sorry, Barbara. Yeah. And then Jerry Mather came in with the Beav hat and played himself. So
that was actually one we just watched a couple weeks ago, Chris, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was funny.
We were commenting on poor Jerry Mathers there with his little ball cap. Like, this poor guy.
Yeah.
Never outgrew the role.
You had a lot of celebrity guests. Is any favorite people to appear on the show that were your favorites?
Martin Mull. Oh, I loved working with Martin Mull. I'm going to miss Martin Mull. He played somebody from another school or another school system.
Something like,
trying to lure Ms. Musso away with diamonds and men, trying to lure her away.
that's right.
Dale's Dancers or something like that.
I remember that. Yeah.
It was wonderful to work with. We also had a couple of guest directors. Please remind me his name. He directed so many fancy, unusual filming things. He directed the film with Tom Hanks and this snow train, where they were all kind of computer generated.
Oh, Polar Express.
Yes.
Who directed that?
Robert.
Was it Robert Zemeckis?
Yes.
Oh, Zemeckis.
Robert.
Zemeckis, yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yes, he loved the show. He loved the shooting style, and he wanted to be part of it. And so he came in and directed one, and we had an absolute blast. So there were various people who were recognizing this style was a breakthrough style of filming, where they'd shoot up the character's nose, camera would be in the refrigerator. When we opened the door, it would be on our full faces. Sometimes they would put the GoCam on an arrow and shoot it through the woods. So it would track through the woods, zooming around trees. And so I think a lot of directors recognized the potential in this filming style and later deployed it in their films.
It was so unique, and just fun.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, season 3, they changed all that. But you mentioned season 3 a little while back. What were your thoughts on the tonal change for season 3? I know that was like a network note that I know none of the creatives involved really wanted to do, but it definitely shifted season 3. Do you remember this?
Well, I'm remembering they brought in John Panette and they fired Frank, the guy that was my assistant. And I was very upset about that.
Yeah.
They wanted to give Miss Musso a love interest. And I thought, John Panette was amazing. but I thought that was really a reach and a stretch. And I really thought Taj was a pretty terrific assistant.
Musso and Frank, that duo was just amazing. You guys had great chemistry on screen. I wanted to ask you, like, working with Taj, off screen, what was y'all's working relationship like?
Oh, we were best friends. He's such a bright kid, very adult. I think he was raised by a single mom, and so he was very sophisticated and a feminist. Just a groovy, extremely bright kid. He was more of an adult than a child, and he was a pleasure to work with, just a joy. So I missed him. I stayed in touch. I was very indignant about it. They also let my makeup girl go, and they brought in a man instead who smoked. And so the aroma of cigarette smoke was forever in the trailer, which I was unhappy about. But nobody consulted me about these things. I was not a producer on the show. So, of course, I had to go along. And that's the fate of a lot of actors, that you just have to play the game and do what you're instructed to do and support the success of the show. I figured they knew what they were doing. They were trying to keep the show on the air, make it a big success.
What are some things that some things about Miss Musso as you played her over the years that surprised you, that you may not have known about her or discovered about her as you went along?
Well, they definitely made Miss Musso oversexed. And I think that it was a kind of a subliminal message to young people that this teacher was a frustrated woman, and the way she dressed and the way she behaved had an innuendo of sexuality, which I think was provocative for young people. So I think that was perhaps a clever device that worked for the show. And pretty much I went with whatever they told me to do. I loved everything exploding, when I got angry. It's a very powerful feeling to have things explode, when you're angry. Luckily, it doesn't happen in real life, or I'd be living in a hovel, a disheveled hovel. The kind of relationship with Pankow was fun to play with for a while. He was very good. And there was such enmity and attraction between us, and it was a lot of fun to play with that. He was a great player. And they shot him so monstrously. They made him really diabolical. So that was really great fun. One of my favorite guest stars, who just passed away a couple weeks ago, is Robert Treber, who paid someone who was a paid kind of spy or somebody working for the school board that was trying to entrap Ms. Musso into a lower salary. And we had some wonderful scenes together where I switch contracts on him and then he switches contracts on me, very playful. He was one that I remembered. There were lots of terrific guest stars, one-offs, not too many recurring like Pankow was.
Pankow is something else. I mean, those it's interesting to juxtapose those two types of Miss Musso. Like when Miss Musso and Pankow are going head to head, she is at her most powerful. And I think I enjoy those the most. It's, to go to your point earlier, the ones where she's kind of like man crazy and like just, over sexualized, like you said. I much prefer the ones where she's like going head to head with Parker, going head to head with Pankow, especially because he is just, like you said, he's diabolical,
Yes. I know in that episode, they brought in Weird Al Yankovic to play romantic music behind our love scene. Which, it was great to have him on the set. I sang with him, when we weren't filming. Really loved him being there. And, we had some episodes where Ms. Musso got to dance on a table. I'd say they gave me more opportunities to have a darn good time than a lot of other shows. I was on Fridays, so I was a little spoiled. Got to do such radically funny things on Fridays. As a matter of fact, a documentary just came out called Thank You Very Much, in which I am interviewed along with Steve Martin and Danny DeVito and Marilu Henner and lots of Andy's friends and his ex-girlfriend about the latter years of Andy Kaufman, during which he came onto the Friday show a couple times.
Oh, yeah.
Broke the fourth wall. And anyway, it's a very intelligent film. It's called Thank You Very Much, and it's on Apple.
Oh, yeah. I want to see that. Yeah.
It's pretty intelligent, I think. And there was never a documentary about Andy Kaufman, although he was very newsworthy. nobody ever made a documentary about him. They made a documentary about the making of The Man on the Moon and Jim Carrey's obsession with that role. But there was never actually a documentary about Andy. They caught me on a strange period. I only had a couple hours to work with them. But the director, Alex Braverman, asked some really insightful questions. And I think it's a really good look into the psyche of Andy.
Yeah, I mean, he was one of the first guys to really play with that, like the blurring the line between performance and reality, and because like his appearances on Letterman, right? Like when he would get in fights with was that his agent or
Jerry Lawler?
Jerry Lawler, that's right,
the wrestler. Yeah,
Yes, that was scary. He really walked the line.
Yeah.
But he kind of, what was his name? Ali G. He became a prankster like Andy and playing tricks on innocent folk. He likewise took some very big, Sacha Baron Cohen took some very big risks with his life and his safety for this effect of duping people. And, as a professional actress, since I've been a very young girl and with Broadway rules and, union rules, the idea of doing anything to violate the show that I'm in was anathema. So to me, it was really scary, crazy, risky. But he got a good result out of it. He had quite a kind of a performance art career using, the medium of TV sitcoms to serve his ends. It was really kind of an astonishing career.
In that, there's that famous scene from Fridays where, he and Michael Richards kind of get into it with the cue cards and everything. Is that when you, like, your reaction to that in the moment, were you just basically describing how you were feeling at that time? Like this?
Well, we all knew he was going to pull something, and I knew early in the week there was no ending for that sketch. So I thought, what are they pulling? What is going to happen to us? Going up without a net and not having a written ending to a sketch was very threatening. But just before the show went on, Jack Burns, who was our head writer and producer, said, okay, he's going to break out. He's going to break out of everything in the show. Just go with it. Stay in character. Play the game and, improvise. You're an improviser. So improvise. So that's what I did. I was really kind of not happy about the situation because I'm a professional and I thought it was really disrespectful to the show that we were on, but it certainly got great ratings. It's still talked about. It's a historical moment in television. I was part of it. So again, some things happen that you just don't plan for.
Speaking of improv, did you get a chance to do much of that on Parker Lewis? I know that we've talked to Troy and Corin, and they both seem pretty adamant that you stuck to the script. But as somebody with improv background, did you get a chance to pull from any of that when you're on the show?
Yeah, I teach improvisation. I have classes here in Los Angeles. If anybody's interested, go to charismatizing.com. I'll be starting summer classes in June. There's always an element of improvisation as an actor all the time. You stick with the lines, but your behavior is completely improvisational. In fact, when everybody auditions for a role, they all get the same lines, but their behavior may be completely different and their interpretation may be completely different. I'm sure my interpretation of Ms. Musso was very different from Sandal Bergman, who came in right after me. So there was the element of improvisation in that I might make funny choices with the lines from time to time that they didn't predict. And they'd usually keep it in. Some directors didn't like it. So we pretty much stuck to the text when they were around. But my behavior was how loud I screamed, how hard I gestured. That was all made up. So the other actors, they were all made up too. The behavior is made up always.
I love that. It's anytime I get to think about Miss Musso just exploding, it just makes me laugh.
Thank you.
So well done.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
I'd entertain you with my exploding.
And on that too, the glass break. You're like, I think it was almost every episode there was like one door glass break triggered by triggered by your thumb or by a look. Do you remember any of the glass break sequences that any stick out as like your favorite?
I think there was one where it was supposed to break and then it didn't, and I kind of gave it a look and then it broke, which is just
Yeah.
luck. I mean, it was just sheer luck. There was no planning that. It was really fun, but of course, if it didn't work, then they had to preset, which took another hour, put in
Oh, yeah.
another piece of fake glass, and and do it over and over and over again until we got it right.
Yeah.
But it was fun. I'd go like this, and it would break, and my thumb became a kind of a character
Yeah.
in the
Yeah.
show. So I had to get manicures all the time, which I was not in the habit of getting. I had to get my nails done all the time. And I began to feel like a prisoner in a Vietnamese POW camp because I was
Yeah.
with those girls every week fixing, sometimes they had to put on fake nails so my hands would look okay in the shot. And, I won't wear nail polish in another, episode of anything again if I can avoid it.
Oh,
Yeah.
So, I mean, in addition to acting, TV, film, Broadway, you're also a writer, correct?
Yeah.
You write for a bunch of different publications.
Yes.
Speak about a little bit about that and about your book as well.
Sure. I've always written. I wrote a school play in the 4th grade that toured the New Haven County school system. I've always written. And the reason I became an actor was they didn't cast me in that play that I wrote. They made me the narrator, and I wanted to be the queen, you see. I said, wait a minute, I want to play the part and write it too. So that's when I decided to be an actor. I was like 10. And I've written a book about my experience as an actor, trying to find love in fake places. And the book is called Odd Woman Out. Let's see if I can show it to you. Odd Woman Out. It's on Amazon. Anywhere you can buy a book, you can get it. I'm also in all the Chicken Soup for the Soul books. I wrote for What I Learned from My Dog, which is Chicken Soup for the Soul's. That's backwards. Chicken Soup for the Soul's latest soothing book.
Okay.
And I have a story in there. I write for a newspaper, a funny paper called Funny Times. Very proud to be a part of it. It's political satire, great political cartoons, and I write satire for them. I've written for the New York Times. I write for lots of different things, but I'm very excited about my book that I am finishing now. I'm in the climax. It's a sci-fi social satire, and it'll be out God knows when. I have to get an agent and a publisher. So if there are any publishers or agents watching, get in touch. It's very far out. And because of the chaos of this particular administration, it's right on point for now, because it takes place at a chaotic time when we're trying to figure out what's good for the planet, what's bad for the planet, what's good for humanity, what's bad for humanity. And it deals with all those issues.
I'm looking forward to that.
reading it.
Me too. Me too.
Yeah, we both loved your first book. It was
Yeah.
I love your writing style.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, it was great. So in addition to writing, apparently you're also an inventor. Did I read that correctly? I saw a blurb somewhere about you being an inventor as well.
Yes, I patented a device in the 90s that turns your shower drain into a dial. And if you turn your foot to the right, it would cycle the water to a recycling tank for filtration and then reuse, in fire retardation or irrigation. And it was patented. The man that played Boris opposite Minka, my character on Rugrats, and played Drew, Stu's brother on Rugrats, Michael Bell, invested with me, and we got a patent attorney, and it was sped up because it was an environmental product to recycle water. And, that didn't fly, unfortunately. The world was not yet ready. Kohler and American Standard plumbing companies were not ready to change or implement a new kind of drain. They were doing so well with the drains they had. Now it might have been more possible. Now there are all kinds of knockoffs of that kind of product for the recycling of shower and tub water. And they're recycling toilet water now, too. So
Yeah.
I was ahead of my time.
Yes.
I feel. But it was worth it. I took a year off from acting and just tried to sell that thing, went around to all the plumbing companies. It didn't fly, but I tried. But so now I just turn my inventiveness to writing.
Is there anything you don't do? I mean, because that's your resume is quite extensive.
Problem is, I get bored really easy, and it's like right now in Los Angeles, the business is really constricted since pandemic, since the SAG and WGA strikes of a few years ago, and since the terrible fires here. There is not much filming going on in Los Angeles, so a girl has to keep herself busy. And so I am teaching online. I teach charisma online, and also in my live improv classes. I teach acting to young people. When I go to the Comic Cons, like I'm doing the Mohegan Sun Comic Con in first weekend in August, I meet students, possible students there who will sign up, and then we'll work on Zoom. I'll give them the basics of good acting, what it's really, really about. And that I love doing. Also, I love all of it. Acting's my favorite, but if they won't let me do it, then I'm not going to be creatively shut down. I'm going to just keep myself creating, because to me it's an antidote to anxiety. It's the way I cope with the news. It's the way I cope with hard times. So it's my little defense mechanism.
You said you were doing a Comic-Con coming up soon?
Yeah, I do a lot of those. I'm doing Comic-Con first weekend in August at Mohegan Sun, which is a casino, an Indian reservation casino in Eastern Connecticut, which is where I'm from. So I'll go visit my mom, who's 101 years old, in New Haven. And then I am also supposed to do one in Oxford, England at the end of July. Still a little up in the air as to whether it'll be 1 day or 2 days. That's called the Oxford Card and Poster Show. And then I'm doing a Seinfeld reunion show here in Hollywood at the Hollywood Comic Con. So I have those lined up, on the weekends. And it's great because I get to meet people that are interested, like you guys are, in my work and the things I've been part of. And it's great to talk about those. And I'll do some of my cartoon voices for people, and I'll promote my books.
We absolutely appreciate your generosity with your time and your willingness to talk to these two schlubs here doing this silly podcast.
No, you're very lovely guys. And I've been enjoying your posts on Instagram and everywhere else. They're very clever. You edit those yourselves?
Yeah, Chip does all the editing. I just post them.
I wish you all kinds of success. You're a great team, and
Thank you.
Hope it all keeps flying and that you move into even bigger audiences.
Yes, that's the hope. Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
Yeah, well, I love talking about Parker Lewis, so for me it was, a good time.
My brother's a dead man.
My friend Jerry said you guys were going to do something really neat today.
I had to entertain you with my exploding.